All right. Hello, everyone. Yeah, having some difficulties with OBS today, which is why I'm starting slightly late, and I haven't actually figured out what's going on. So you're probably seeing the camera in the top right corner is not the size it's supposed to be, but for some reason I can't edit or resize anything in the OBS UI today. So I don't know if something changed or what. Quite possibly. I mean, there might have been an OBS update I missed that changed stuff. But there's literally, yeah, I restarted it. I looked at some settings and stuff. I just can't figure out what's going on. So anyway, you're gonna have to deal with that slightly weird configuration thing this week, and then I'll sort out what the hell just happened. Basically, like in the UI, it used to be that some stuff would be locked, some stuff wouldn't be locked. If you unlock them, you could select them in the preview and then you could resize them. I don't have the lock unlock icon anymore. I don't see any way to lock or unlock anything. I can't select anything in the preview. So yeah, something kind of happened. I don't know what's going on. Like I'm still looking at it because I just don't get it. Like it should be something super obvious, and I'm just not seeing it for some reason. So that's just weird. Yeah, I can rename, remove stuff. I just don't see. It lets me add. Yeah, it's as if it doesn't actually let me edit the source. Like I can go mess with other things. Yeah, just don't see it. I mean, just yeah, something happened. Anyways, we'll probably figure that out at some other point. Yeah, even there, like the get all transformation, edit transform, all that kind of stuff is all grayed out. I can't change anything. Is it like a global setting that's running everything read-only in some ways? If it is, I've not found the big knob to change that. No. Yeah, I don't know. There's something going on. Oh, also can't. Yeah, all the profile stuff is all locked. Huh. Yeah, anyway, something is really weird with OBS today. It was fine last week. So, and I'm using Debian now, stable Debian 13, so I'm not sure what would have changed. Might be some file system stuff, like could be that it just can't write to the files and therefore it gets you like a read-only view, but didn't complain at startup or anything. So I don't know. Anyways, not really what people are here for. So let's just ignore that. You're gonna have to deal with me being tiny and not centered correctly for this stream. And hopefully things will behave again next week. So, YouTube is complaining about bitrates too. Okay, well, hopefully that's not a problem. All right. Let me know if there's any other issue, like with the video quality or something else. Like I don't know if anything else broke in OBS, but yeah, let me know if you see anything. So, IncusOS, that's what we're actually here for. So, what happened over the past week? Let's go and take a look. I need to increase the font size a bit. That's easier for you all to read. There you go. And yeah, let's take a look for past week. Quite a bit happened, as you can see. It was basically the one page and we're still looking at yesterday. All right, last week, there we go. So, I mean, last week was really landing all of the ARM64 support. I did that test build, that worked fine. I'm actually looking at starting to build them on GitHub Actions. That's not been merged yet, but we should otherwise be in pretty good shape. And so if we look at, where was the ARM? Okay, there we go, ARM64 support. That's what landed last week, so that's where we were at. Then we did a bunch of cleanup, mostly because we're running IncusOS on variety of servers now, so we're getting some feedback, like some some new edge cases here and there, like both ourselves at Future Fusion and also through using it for the demo server. And also a bunch of community users are now running it on actual machines. So we got a bunch of feedback for different things that are not correctly detected, and I've been tweaking things. So that's why you see things like the setup mode, deployed mode, and there's also audit mode that had to be added yesterday. That's effectively secure boot variables that are measured by the TPM that we need to be aware of so that we can show the proper status when you query the security status of the system. We've also we've fixed a bunch of performance stuff. So there's one where effectively instead of querying all of the encrypted storage volume state at the time where you like effectively when you query the security details, we now do it on startup and just cache it because it was getting pretty slow. A few more things we had to do, like fixing up network issues. We had a bunch of those kind of last week and a few more actually this week around getting the MAC addresses and IP addresses and MTU and all that stuff set at the right spot so that it's consistent, so that the naming of devices is also consistent. So we've got a bunch of that has landed. Improved early error support. So if something fails pretty early on, especially things like hardware validation and whatnot, we want it to be very visible and show up very quickly, not just as like a log message that you won't notice. So there's been a bit of tweaking on that front. Detection of the root device had to be tweaked a bit. And yeah, there was an issue. This one actually bite us a few times, which was kind of annoying. Effectively, if IncusOS was seeing an update, it would stage that update in the second slot to then be the next thing to be booted. But if any update was to show up after that initial update staging, it would not refresh the slot. So that meant that unless you were rebooting with every single update, you would get into the situation of staging an update. Then when you reboot for it, the first thing the system does is pull an even newer update and then reboot. That's pretty annoying and was particularly problematic because one of the updates that we pushed that got staged had broken networking. So then any system that had that update staged for next reboot, when they would reboot, they would not be able to reach the network. The user had to reboot the machine again, boot it back on the previous image, and then it would update and fix itself. Not exactly ideal. So that logic has now been fixed, and that should make things a lot smoother. We've also added the host name now to the UI. That's something I kind of needed when I was looking at dozens of different servers and kind of losing track of what I'm looking at. So I fixed that. We fixed some issue with the stacking of model messages and tweaked a bunch of stuff around services. So one thing I had with one of our customers is they are using NVMe over TCP on a like dual 100 gigabit type storage network with jumbo frames. And we had an issue with the MTU handling. As you can see, it's fixed right there, which was then causing a bunch of problems with service startup. So the NVMe service could not really start up. It didn't have proper timeouts on the commands, so it would be stuck potentially indefinitely, or in this case was stuck for about half an hour, which was not ideal. So we fixed a few things. Services are no longer fatal, so if they fail to start on startup, Incus will still boot up so that you can actually connect to it and try to fix the config. Same thing on shutdown. If we can't shut down a service, we're not crashing the entire thing. We'll just move on to the next service and do our best to still turn everything off. As mentioned, we didn't have proper timeouts on the NVMe logic. So if a command, like one of the NVMe command, would just hang indefinitely, it was basically holding up the entire boot. So now we've got, we're using the context timeouts to have sane timeout around that. Then the underlying issue was about MTU. That's why we're getting all of the timeouts and everything. So fix the MTU issue correctly now. And then fixed some other handling with the new storage API, where systems that were installed prior to it couldn't be properly detected. So that's been fixed now to support both older systems and newer systems. and also did a bit of filtering so that it doesn't show loop devices, for example. Now, I think previous would be the right page, is it? Yeah, that's the one. Okay, what else did we do? So more tweaks to the storage API. So one thing we added is detection for whether a drive is local or remote. Currently, we support detecting NVMe over TCP versus normal local NVMe, but we're also going to be adding fiber channel and potentially IncusOS and that kind of stuff to the mix, so that when you look at a list of devices, of disks, you know which one are local, which one are not. And those that are not local cannot be included in new local storage pools for obvious reasons. So that's that set of changes here. Updated. Then yesterday, or actually the day before, I added support for the Incus Resources API, which we use to list all of the hardware and some system information. Back when we were only running Incus on top of IncusOS, that wasn't really needed. We could just hit it through the Incus API instead of the IncusOS API. But because we're looking at also using IncusOS as the kind of the base image for running Operation Center and Migration Manager, in those environments, they don't have a resources API, so it made sense to actually add the endpoint directly to IncusOS so that we've got a consistent experience for that. Logic is absolutely tiny. I can actually show you because it literally just imports the logic from Incus. So that's the whole thing. It's literally import shared resources from Incus and then call get resources and return it. So it's absolutely tiny. It's guaranteed to line up with what Incus normally does, but now it's natively in IncusOS. Next, we fixed another issue with the services. So that's still storage related, where we were iterating through the services in alphabetical order. And as it turns out, L comes before N, which means LVM would be brought up before NVMe. So if you're using shared storage with LVM cluster on top of NVMe, you had the issue of trying to bring up the pool before it was connected to the system. So we just fixed that by effectively having a fixed order. That's the order in which we want to start up. And then we can just reverse that order for shutdown. And for the API itself, we still give you a alphabetical order. So that just fixed that. Then one thing we're still finishing, there's still a few final touches to make it behave perfectly, I think, is we've added KPX. So KPX is a Go proxy dispatcher kind of thing. So basically you run it on your system. It acts as a local HTTP, HTTPS proxy, and it has a config that lets you dispatch specific domains, specific IP addresses, etc. to different proxy servers. This and on top of being able to do that, it also knows how to do more advanced authentication. So things like Kerberos authentication. This is particularly relevant in enterprise environments where they will pretty often have a set of networks that should never be proxied, a bunch of networks that do need to be proxied but don't need authentication, and then a bunch of networks that need to be proxied and need authentication, potentially even through Kerberos. So with that in place, it changes our syntax quite a bit from just give us the proxy server and we throw everything at it, to give us a list of proxy servers and then tell us what traffic to send to which, and we can now properly dispatch the traffic. And we support Kerberos authentication, which was something we needed for one of our customers. I'm saying it's still work in progress because we noticed a few downsides to that. One thing I noticed yesterday is that KPX, for some reason, has IPv6 disabled, so that was causing some issues. I patched it up to turn it back on. We'll see that in one of the more recent commits. It's a bit of a hack. I need to upstream it, and we need to make sure there's no other weirdness or regression or anything that came from it. Because we don't just use KPX when you put a proxy config in place, we just always use it. So effectively the way we've configured things is that everything running on IncusOS that wants to access HTTP or HTTPS always goes through the local KPX proxy, and then that proxy is either configured for just straight up direct out, no proxying, or proxying to specific servers. That allows us to reconfigure the proxy on demand without needing to restart all of the applications, without having some stuff get out of sync, which is really convenient. But it means that even users that don't need a proxy server at all are still going through it. So they there might be some side effects we still need to uncover and sort out. All right, so that's the extra config proxy. We noticed another issue. We were wondering why it was taking so long to download updates and apply updates. And after a bit of debugging yesterday, we tracked it down to text consoles being slow, basically. It's a bit ironic, but when you would apply an IncusOS update, there would be a progress bar. And each update to the progress bar, which was happening every 24 megs, I believe, in our current logic, would require a full screen redraw. A full screen redraw takes milliseconds on the actual screen, but because TTY as 0, if present and not configured otherwise, would be limited to 9600 baud, it was taking somewhere around 10 seconds, I think, to actually update the text console, and that was assuming a single write would do it for the screen, and I think our text library does slightly more than that. So in practice, we were looking at every update that would happen every 24 megs, taking somewhere between 30 seconds-ish. And because the progress update function call was part of the actual IO path, it was literally slowing down the rate at which we are downloading and applying the update. Because it would download 24 megs, would try to update the screen, that could take 30 seconds. Then once that completes, it would go and download another 24 megs, and then update the screen again. And that was getting horribly slow. There were some ways around it. Like one way would have been to just decouple things and have like effectively use a Go channel as a queue and push updates to the queue and then apply those as we get them. Or more likely, always pull the latest entry and drop the rest. But the reality is that the text console, we only really use it for debugging on top of Incus VMs. So we've just changed the logic now to only render the IncusOS UI on the text console if it's an IncusOS VM, which then fixes, if it's an Incus VM, which then kind of gives us what we want, where it's like super fast to update on actual hardware, still super fast to update in VMs, where the text console is effectively unlimited speed. And if we find down the line that there are actual systems, maybe when we look more on the ARM side that do need the console on text, we can add more exceptions to the list so that those do get the rendering on a text console. There's a question about is Kerberos still common on-prem? Well, it is because of that thing called Active Directory. So it's like Kerberos directly, as in someone running MIT Kerberos or something like that, not very common. It's mostly like you might see it in like academia, but not too much outside of that. But otherwise, Microsoft Active Directory does use Kerberos for authentication. So anything that's tied to Active Directory that uses Microsoft single sign-on and that kind of stuff is all going to be Kerberos. All right, and once we fixed the issue with the text console for the UI, that actually let us turn some stuff back on. So we're displaying proper progress during install and that kind of stuff again now, which we had to turn off for a little bit. Then boot fields to storage API to info. Okay, yeah, so I did a new entry. Actually, I haven't actually seen that one yet, but in the device list, just like we tag what's remote, we also tag what's used as the boot drive, so that you also can't use the boot drive in a local storage pool, and that it's kind of obvious which is which. As mentioned, audit mode was also added, so we fixed that. Bit more logic around NVMe, because we noticed that on some systems, the NVMe disk is connected to an NVMe subsystem, which is connected to the actual PCI bus. On others, the NVMe disk is directly connected to the PCI bus. And we only had logic for the indirect case through the NVMe subsystem and not the direct case with the PCI bus. So that's also been fixed. It's actually kind of interesting because that's a change that also happened at the QEMU level. So if you use QEMU 10, your NVMe drive goes through an NVMe subsystem. If you use QEMU 9, the NVMe drive goes through direct PCI attachment. And yeah, it's just a change that they made. So we noticed it in VMs, we also noticed it on physical machines. Matthias's system, which I think is an AMD Threadripper, has the NVMe subsystem layout. my desktop machine, which is kind of the same generation, but it's just a desktop Ryzen chip, does not. It uses directly on the PCI bus. So just different layouts, and we've seen the same thing on servers, so now I support both correctly. More proxy stuff. Yeah, so that's still left some remaining pieces from the informatic support for the proxies. Some issue with the state. And then some work I started doing in preparation for today's live stream around the image publishing. So right now, every image had, well, until now, every image had a single channel. So it could be assigned to, daily or stable or LTS or something, which is not really how we expect things to run in practice. In practice, we expect images to be built daily or even more frequently than that, to have them show up in the daily channel, which is completely untested. It's just directly published. And then the images that satisfy our quality standard would then be promoted from daily over to stable. And when we do that, we don't, like, the image shouldn't disappear from the daily channel. Someone who's following daily builds should still get that image, but so should now someone who's using the stable channel. So instead, what we've done is just replace channel with channels, so that an image can be part of multiple channels, and when it gets promoted from daily to stable, it doesn't go away from daily. As I said, like, I had to patch KPX to fix IPv6, and that's that one. Small typo in the channel change from earlier, so that's been fixing that too. And then a bit of a chicken and egg thing we had going on, where Incus has now been updated to interact with the IncusOS API to know what networks it should list and what networks it shouldn't. But IncusOS itself talks to Incus to initialize it. And we were getting that weird issue where IncusOS would try to initialize Incus. Incus would try to talk to IncusOS, but IncusOS was not yet listening because it was still initializing things. So I just kind of fixed that so that the REST API, the built-in REST API of IncusOS now starts earlier, so that by the time we go to application initialization, we already have the API endpoint, and Incus will be able to talk to IncusOS while IncusOS is effectively initializing applications. So anyway, a bit of a dependency loop type thing there that was kind of wrong, so fixed that yesterday. Well, I mean, 8 hours ago was pretty late. So just been fixing that one. Then we saw a small issue in our tests where the state file was not consistently ordered and was causing some issues. So that's been fixed. And also, one thing we noticed with updates was that it typically what could happen is you would download an update, an application update, download an OS update, reboot, then it would fetch application updates. That's not ideal. That just made kind of the reboot time be somewhat random, because if there was an application update, it would take longer. So instead, what we do now is that whenever we download updates, we download all the application updates, then we download the OS update as well, and then if any reboot is required, the reboot happens, which means that post-reboot, everything starts immediately. There's no more download or anything. The only case where there would be a download post-reboot would be after installation at this point. So that should make things a bit more consistent, where basically you'll be able to know that your machine needs, I don't know, 2-3 minutes to reboot from like IncusOS going down to the machine going back up, and that time should remain constant because there's no potential extra steps that might happen on boot up. All right, so that's what happened over the past week. Quite a few things, as you can tell. And I've got something else here that's open. So that's the ARM64 build support, which we can probably merge and then tag just to start getting an initial set of images with ARM support. That will also kind of play into the publishing effort, because we need to actually support publishing multiple architectures. I'm just taking a quick look off screen because some of the fixes that were in there were needed just to be able to fix the try it environment, like get it onto a newer image, because we're getting some issues. And looks like it's now been rolled out. I don't know if enough users used it already. That's if I get a new session, I'm on the new image, but we can check. OS 1.0. What am I running? 2025 08 14 15. Is that what I published? What's the current image? Let's see. OS. Latest image is 14 15 28. Okay, so that's that one and that's that one. So that's working correctly. So that one was hitting the chicken and egg issue during initialization. So that's looking good. Is Incus itself running? It is. And I also wanted to just undo a hack, because as mentioned, we had some issue with IPv6 and the proxy, so I had to temporarily allow IPv4 in try it, which is not really something I want. So I just blocked it now in the ACL. And let's see. Yep, so that's the loading of IPv6 since IPv4 is no longer allowed now. Excellent. So yeah, connectivity is fine. We've got a newer image deployed in the try it environment. And the proxy stuff is all good. Excellent. Let's just try the UI, because that caused some issue in the past. That's working. Okay, container is running. There's an IP address. Everything seems perfectly fine. And can we get a terminal? We can. Cool. Excellent. So all good on that front. Now let's look at merging this guy. So I can just show you what's the change. One of the difficulty with this change is that there's basically no way to test it because it's a GitHub workflow that only triggers on a new tag. So it should work. Basically, we use self-hosted builders for image builds. So let me actually get a terminal up on screen so I can show that. I think I've showed it before, but our GitHub runners, they run obviously on Incus in my cluster here. So we can see we've got currently an IncusOS PR that's going through testing. And let's go like that so that it fits on screen. And so we've got AMD64, ARM64. So that's gonna use a test run, like a VM of each. We're building currently on Debian 12. We can probably move that to 13 shortly. It doesn't really matter. And the environment is self-hosted, 4 CPU, 4 gigs of RAM, and 100 gigs of disk. And then the changes I did, we were effectively selecting every one of the user dash files. So I don't see a reason to name them by name, especially since the architecture name was embedded inside it. So I just moved that to user dash star.rar. That should pick them all. And then the artifact name goes from just image to image dash architecture name, so that when we do get a build, if we go look at an action build here, like this one, it's a tag. We used to get just image. Now we should get image dash X86 image dash AR64, or was it AMD64 and ARM64? I don't remember, but we're gonna get the architecture names that way. And then we can have the publishing logic detect which is which, download the things, put them correctly on disk. So anyway, let's try this thing. So I'm just gonna merge this guy. Go bypass merge. So that's not gonna do anything because that workflow is still not running. Now what I'm gonna do is just generate a new tag in the repo. So okay, just go in the IncusOS repo, pull the current tree, and then generate a new tag and push that. And now that I've pushed the tag, we should see a new workflow show up. Build, yep, good. Matrix, AMD64, ARM64. Okay, so the two jobs are here. And then if we go look at our GitHub runners, yeah, there we go. So there's Arthos is AMD64. So what's happening is that there's both a commit job that needs to run, so just like a commit validation thing, and then the tag itself. So that's why we've got 2. And then shortly after, there we go, AMD64, so ARM64, so that's on Dell Mac, is doing the other one. So one of the Intel ones has now started. Let's see, the other one is starting up now. And so is the ARM64. Okay, so once they're online and the GitHub worker is started, then the image build will actually begin. And assuming nothing goes wrong, we should have both X86 and ARM64 builds of the image come out that we can then try to download and publish. Okay, yeah, it looks like they're actually starting up now. Just checking. My phone was buzzing like crazy, so I'm just checking what's going on. Okay, yeah, it looks like it's just a contractor doing some stuff. All right. Let's see, they should all be running now. Yep, they are. And if we go back to GitHub, that means these 2 jobs will start running pretty shortly. Yeah, this one is still waiting. Still waiting. So it's probably just installing the dependencies and starting the GitHub runner. Yep, there we go. They're both running now. I'm not too worried about the Intel one, obviously, because we've been running those for a long time. When it takes about 15 to 20 minutes, that should run just fine. And that's the equivalent on ARM. So we'll see. Like this one could easily fail because of something dumb. Like we just are downloading something that's clearly only for Intel, and that's gonna fail or something like that. But we should know pretty soon, and with a bit of luck, we're gonna get both builds ready. All right, so let's look at, not sure why. Oh, I guess I closed the other tabs. Okay. So let's look at some of the improvements I wanted to do in this live stream. So it's basically that set of 3. We've got that command called image publisher. What it does is it connects to GitHub, looks at the most recent GitHub actions, looks for the most recent tag, downloads those artifacts, puts them on the static image server, and then people download from that. The tool is pretty dumb. It basically just gets the latest one, downloads it, generates index.json, update.json, moves on. It doesn't actually look at what else is already on disk, so it doesn't put previous entries in the index ever right now. It doesn't really understand channels. It doesn't really understand retention. It doesn't really understand any of that. It doesn't really have configuration either. It's a whole bunch of environment variables. So there's a bunch of cleanup to do. Like that command basically needs to be mostly rebased onto what we have for the Incus simple streams command on the Incus side, which serves a mostly similar job. So that we effectively end up having a sync command that goes and looks at GitHub, imports the new images. We have image retention, so that we effectively keep enough image on disk that for any channels that we track, we have effectively X number of images. We'll probably keep the last 3, and then any image that's past that cutoff point should get deleted from disk to save space. It also needs to learn about there being both Intel and ARM, download both of the images, merge them together into one tree. So yeah, there's a bit of work there. I'm probably not going to do everything on stream, but I should be able to at least start putting some of the basic logic in place. I kind of split that command, use Cobra, so SPF13's Cobra, kind of command line parser, create subcommands, just kind of puts a bunch of stuff in place, and then solving those issues will be pretty easy afterwards. Oh yeah, there was a question from Jared about how the work the contractors are doing with the stuff outside. So for those who've not heard me mention it in previous streams, I basically have contractors working on a secondary building here on my property that will turn into my office, data center, lab type environment to just more cleanly separate personal life and work life to an extent. So that's going pretty well in theory. Again, it's construction, so that rarely is true, but in theory, they should be done by the end of the month. The inside of the building is mostly good. There's just flooring and a staircase that need to arrive next week. And this week, they're kind of finishing the outside, like the deck and siding and that kind of stuff. So making some pretty good progress there. I see more discussions around the Kerberos thing, and also pointing out, like as I did earlier, that yeah, Kerberos is used behind Active Directory, so that's probably its biggest user right now. All right, let's go look at some code in the 20-ish minutes we have left on this stream, and let me zoom things a bit. We're just gonna keep that build running and keep an eye on it every so often, but let's mostly look at the code. So, all right, I've got IncusOS here. Let's just get into my branch, rebase onto the main branch. Here we go. And then go into the code base, command image publisher. So just building a command there. And I mean, ideally, I'd just like to be able to do a quick test run. I don't actually remember what's required. Like, I don't have the production signing certificates and stuff here, but I don't think it's actually needed. So out of the box, it wants a target path. It picks an update channel, update origin, update severity automatically. And it doesn't do any signing if the keys are not set, so that's fine. The only thing I might run into is GitHub rate limits and stuff. So let me just check. There's a token thing for GitHub, the GH token. So I'm just gonna move that thing off screen for a second so I can export a valid GitHub token in the environment. If I find one easily, hold on. Okay, yeah, I found one that we're using elsewhere. Let's use that. I think it's probably properly restricted as far as the token goes, so it wouldn't be a huge deal if people saw it, but I still don't want to take that chance. There we go. So now I've got a token in the environment, and if I do image publisher, oh, it's the GitHub token, because GitHub is so there's a question around what the token is. The token is a GitHub token, which the one I'm using is just read-only, doesn't have any access. But if you don't use one, then GitHub rate limits apply to you in the API. And since I'm gonna be running a bunch of API commands kind of back to back, there's a good chance I would get rate limited. So I'm setting that just to avoid the issue. Okay, so running the command with a publishing path. Okay, it wants the path to exist. I mean, we could probably fix that actually. Image publisher. Okay. Let's just make it create the path if it doesn't exist. I don't remember if it needs permissions, or make their all. Maybe it does. Okay. Oops. Oh. Now you can see the tokens. So that's fun. Anyway, as I said, it's a read-only token, so it's probably fine. But I might still regenerate it afterwards. Come on, where's the command? There. I'm just gonna go triple check what that token does. Yeah, the token has only read-only access. That's not too bad. I was just rechecking in case it had more access than I thought. So that means I can keep it going for doing the live stream, and then I'll just regenerate it afterwards, so that people can't count in my rate limit. I don't even know if the GitHub does per account rate limiting or anything. I think they literally just don't want um, crawlers to directly hit their API. I think that's the main deal. But yeah, it's still not a good idea to have tokens out on the internet. Okay, so this is downloading the from GitHub Actions. That can be a bit slow. Let's see what we're doing with the build. Go. Okay, so we're basically building ZFS here. That's usually the step that takes the longest time doing the entire build. It's actually funny, like both Intel and ARM are the same stage, so you'd often think ARM would be slower, but so far we're about the same speed. Okay, so that's going on, and here we're still importing the image. This is going to be a slightly annoying live stream if we spend all our time just waiting for stuff to happen, but okay. Oh, I think I'm downloading in a temporary folder. Okay. Yeah, there we go. 1.7 gigs. And it's unpacked. So that uses the old file names and everything, single architecture, and then unpacks it from the zip file. As soon as the new tag is done building, that's gonna break the publishing. But that's kind of expected. So anyway, can just commit the current fix. So just put image publisher create target if missing. So let's do that. And then as I said, we've got similar logic going on in the Incus code base under the Incus simple streams command. So my idea is to mostly rip off the general structure and start reshuffling, because right now the image publisher is literally a single piece of Go with like it's not a lot of logic, but just one file, one main function calling a subfunction, and that does everything. That's not exactly what we want to do. This should actually become a new main underscore sync. So effectively the sync command is what we have. And then we'll add the rest of the logic in place. So I'll just see Jared saying like, didn't mean to stress you about it. No, like, yeah, no stress. Just like as happens pretty often with me, like I'm like, oh, okay, this is a token. It might actually be security sensitive, so let's be careful and not straight up copy paste it in front of everyone on stream. But then I've got a tendency of always going back into my bash, into my shell history. So obviously it ended up showing. So that's when I was like, okay, let's make sure that this token can't actually do anything bad, because I've got other tokens that have actual write access, actual access to private repos, that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that this one is in fact a read-only public repo only token. It is, it's fine. I think it's only used in a couple of places in our infrastructure for when we need to download stuff and not be rate limited effectively. So I'll just regenerate it after the stream and replace that value in a few places and should be good to go. Like I don't know that there's anything that could really be done to abuse it, but I'm not gonna take that chance. All right, Incus simple streams main. Okay, so we can just straight up copy that across. I think it's the first command within our IncusOS codebase that actually uses a command line parser. So that uses SPF13. That's so we don't really have the concept of version, so it can just go away. Okay, Incus simple stream. So obviously that's now image publisher. Maintains IncusOS image server. It's the kind of thing where like just that tool and the image customizer, like they're in the code base, everyone can look at them, can play with them. In practice, they only really make sense for ourselves to run on the public image server and publishing infrastructure. But in the past, we had that tendency of having that tooling just be like a bunch of shell scripts and Python scripts and whatnot, and have them include a bunch of internal logic and endpoints and hard-coded stuff, which then made it difficult to share with people when they want to fix an issue on the public image server. So we're not doing that again with IncusOS. We're just putting all the tooling that we use also on our side directly in the repo, so that anyone who notices, something being wrong in the update files, or typos, or wanting some extra metadata, changelog, whatever, you can contribute. IncusOS updates. It's probably not really an image server, it's the update server. Okay. This tool handles publishing, cleanup, promotion, and cleanup of IncusOS updates. So something or not. No help. Yeah, the version stuff, let's just remove that. Okay, and then look at the sub commands. So I don't think we're going to be redoing the add, remove type stuff like simple streams. For us, it's mostly like the main command is sync, and the other command that we'll need is promote. So promote is effectively bump something from the base channel, which would be the testing channel. Or daily channel, I'm not sure how we're gonna call it. I think testing makes more sense because the builds won't strictly be daily. We will probably have daily builds, but we might have more than daily. So I think we just have the channel called testing and then have testing in stable. So the promote command is what we would use to then say this image, which is currently, most likely available in the testing channel, promote it to this target channel. So in this case, stable. We might want the mode command to effectively get something back out of a channel. It's not clear that we would necessarily do that now because it doesn't really do any good. That's an issue we've had with Ubuntu and packages too. Like if we push a bad update to all Ubuntu users, it doesn't do you any, and it's broken. It doesn't do you any good to remove the update from the package server. It helps in that nobody else is going to receive it from that point on, but it doesn't cause any system that got impacted to downgrade to the previous version. What you actually need to do is rush a new update with a higher version number and then push that to everyone immediately, so that you not only prevent damage, so that you both fix the current systems and like prevent damage to anyone else. So there might be a case for wanting to demote temporarily, but it should never be the full solution. It should just be a temporary trick until a fixed image is available a few minutes later. So anyway, for now we don't really need it, also because we don't really have stable builds right now, but so I think we can just do promote and sync as the initial set of commands. So we can also eventually add list and status and all that kind of stuff, but Right now I can do it by just looking at the file system tree, it's fine. So we'll do promote and we'll do sync as the two commands for now. Sync cmd. All right, so we'll just do these two. Then the main parser, check arguments. That's a convenience function we have within Incus so that it can do a bunch of validation for us. So that should be fine for the main file. And obviously that then requires a bit of extra logic. Okay, so add command doesn't. There's something else we fixed in Incus, I think, but not yet on all of our subcommands. This does not need to be exported. Was there anything else that doesn't need to be exported in there? Like we've got much stricter static analysis in IncusOS than we do in Incus, mostly because Incus has a lot of code and we're slowly retrofitting some of that static analysis. So I expect the IncusOS stuff to complain quite loudly. What's the simplest command that we have? It's verify. And verify, yeah, we can use that as a bit of a template. Okay, let's just copy it over. It's gonna be easier. So let's copy main verify as main promote, and then we'll tweak it into something that looks good. For now, the build is just the goal is just to have something that builds, not something that works. So I'm just putting in a placeholders for both commands, so we can build it, make sure that the general structure looks good, and then can fit the logic in there. Okay, so anything that says command verify should be command promote. Go. Then this does not need to be exported. Neither does this one. That's why we had this kind of pointless commands just to avoid the issue of it being exported or not, but we can just not export it. That fixes the problem. Okay, short promotes the build to a channel. Okay, can type, there we go. Maybe target channel. So just putting some comments there. There's a question from Jared around file naming, specifically noticing that we're using main underscore something instead of main dash something, and whether there's like a standard for that. Not really. I tend to use dashes within binaries themselves, so the comments themselves, which means I tend to use dashes in folder names. But within a Go package, I tend to use underscore. I don't think it really matters one way or another. But that's just kind of what we've been going with way back when we first created LexD. I don't know that there's any kind of standard on the Go side for that stuff. Okay, so check args. This one says 0, which is wrong. That's minimum arguments, maximum arguments in that particular function. So in our case, we're gonna always need a build ID and a channel. So it's 2 and 2. So what we always need. And then the logic itself, we don't care about any of it. So I'm just gonna clear all of that, and just have it return errors.new not implemented. Okay. Oops. Okay. So that should be fine for promote. I mean, let's see how much we can build right now, because like it's importing a ton of stuff that it doesn't need. So I don't know if it already gives us the list of that. Use of internal. Okay. Where do we use this CMD stuff? Oops, CLI format section. Okay, well, we can't use that, obviously. I don't actually recall what format section was doing in live. My gut feeling is not anything too useful, so let's just go see. But it's in internal. It said internal CMD format section. What does that do? Indent the content. Okay. Okay, well, for now I'm just gonna go with the lazy route of just copying that in. It might be easier to just not use that function, but just copy it in there. That's gonna become utils.go. Package main, and let's export this guy. All right. Now that means that this one can go away, and format section just turned into that. Okay. Missing go entry. Yeah, that makes sense. Need to actually add SPF13. There we go. And now we're getting the failures I was hoping to get. So all of the imports we don't need. Crypto encoding format IO. Okay. Crypto encoding format IO. Is there more? FS and OS and simple streams. Yeah, makes sense. We only need that. Okay, good. Now let's look at main.go. There's a bunch of errors in here. I mean, part of it is sync now being mad at us because main is defined twice, so that can go away. I need to actually still convert that file to the new syntax, but that's just sorting out the rest first. So main.go add command has no field method. Okay, so that's so this add command, that's a Cobra thing, so that needs to be add command. The one that is not exported is this guy, so like that. Okay, that's better. And then in promote, we call the run command directly here, which should be this instead. And now we're just complaining about command.sync, so that's good. If I go here, I can take this entire thing, go into sync. Don't actually care about that. And then the type command promote becomes command sync here. And the run command actually turns into that. We don't need the argument checking anymore. And instead of OS args, we can directly use args. Okay, something kind of like that. Still need to change all of the descriptions here. Let's do imports, new images, and cleans up the tree. extra image based on the retention policy. Something not. Should be descriptive enough. Let's try to build this stuff. So we're missing Cobra context stuff. Okay. So I don't think we get a direct context, so I guess we'll just need to do context to do. I don't remember. There's probably some context stuff now going on with Cobra. It's just all of the Incus stuff was written before Neonat really existed, so that's why that's still missing. I think it's not just their import path. Yeah, okay. Let's see how badly we messed up the static analysis by doing all that. Not so bad. I was expecting quite a bit worse, actually. Let's see, 52. Oops. Okay, so I think it's just complaining that it doesn't need the receiver. Is that it? Yeah, error string should not be capitalized. Yeah, so that's the usual Incusism. That's fine. Missing white space. Main sync on 58. Sure. Okay, so that's that. Let's just see where we're at as far as building stuff. Both images built successfully, AMD64, ARM64. Sweet. And that should mean if I go summary on this build, yeah, we've got both image files, image AMD64, image ARM64. Both quite large. ARM is surprisingly smaller, actually, about 400 megs. I mean, it's probably just kernel modules, honestly, but it's quite a difference. All right, so that's looking good. Now, if we do another run of the command, what was the terminal I was using for that? I guess so. Yeah, this guy. I'm in the wrong folder. Let's just go back here. And yeah, unknown command, so that's good. We can see image publisher, promote sync, help. Okay. If I do sync, it shows. Okay, so there's just the help is kind of wrong, so let's go fix that. Image publisher. Oh, actually, the promote is wrong too. Promote should actually be 3. So we need the path 2. So the use is it's not really target, it's the path. It's effectively where all the stuff is published, and then we want the image, and then we want the child. That's the syntax for this guy, and then for sync. Sync, I just need one argument, I don't need 2. And sync should be path. Okay. So if I rebuild this stuff. Okay, and now if we run it again, promote should show both all the arguments needed, sync shows all the arguments needed. And if we run on publish, okay, that's good. So it failed at 386. And the failure is when it tries to download the artifact, because there's no artifact found since it doesn't support the different architectures yet. So that makes sense. We're actually going to need to change things a bit for the different architectures. I think it's basically building a map of architecture to artifact name, to GitHub artifacts. That's probably the way to do it. So something like that. Oops. Come on. Okay, I think that should do it. And then not strings dot as prefix, the artifact name, and now it's image dash lowercase. We continue. Otherwise, we're gonna need to figure out the architecture. So we need to split the artifact name into dash with 2 parts. If we don't get 2 fields, we continue. And if we do get our 2 fields, then check if we already have an artifact for this particular architecture. So that means we look at fields 1. And then if we don't, then artifacts at fields 1 becomes this. Okay, and we don't break because we need to actually iterate through everything. Okay, and then once we're done, then that's when we actually start doing unpacking and whatnot. So this piece we can, what are we gonna do here? Like if we just want things to go back to working order, the easiest is to replace this stuff here with oh, it's like old pointers everywhere in their stuff. It's kind of annoying. Do we actually need anything other than that field? No, we just need the ID. Okay, so instead of doing all this mess, we can probably just do int, and then in here we can actually do the ID. That would make things slightly cleaner. And now let's just do bad idea, because obviously we might be missing the image, but you know, just doing that. Okay, no new variables here, so that's not good. That's the full list of artifacts, so we actually want, let's call that images, I guess. I should have noticed it was literally right on the screen that it was gonna conflict, but anyways. Okay, I'll try it again. That's better. It's an int64, not an int. That's fine. Let's just change the type. And now we're happy. Okay. So let's try that again. And it's done loading. Okay. So that's just basically moving to Cobra, new structure for the command, and just adding support for passing the new artifact names, and currently just hard-coded to pull the AMD64 one as was done before. So effectively that gets us the tool back to how it used to work. I've got a bunch more things to do with this tool, because like it takes a whole bunch of environment variables right now that probably should be command line flags instead. So that might be something I'll do pretty soon. Also, as I mentioned, actually downloading both images. So I need to unpack both the images, download both the images in a temporary location, and then from those images pull the files from there and rename them correctly. If we look at the tree, at the published tree, there's a bit of merging needed, because what we'll effectively have is one folder and then both images in there. As we can see, none of those mention architectures, so that will need to be fixed. Those are already fine. Those also don't mention architectures, so that will also need to be fixed. Or what I might do, which might be easier, is actually create a subfolder per architecture, then unpack the architecture stuff in there and just keep the metadata in the folder here, pointing to both depending on the architectures of them. Because in here we already do have the architecture for every object, so it will just make it so the file name has the folder in it. So that will get us hopefully later today publishing of both AMD64 and ARM64 images on the image server. And then from there, I can add more logic to do the multi-channel, so we can soon have very frequent testing builds. And then whenever we're happy with some of those, we can promote them to stable. And then users who want something a bit less likely to break every 5 minutes can use the stable builds instead. All right, I think that's gonna be it for this live stream. Hopefully that was a useful update on the state of IncusOS and what we've been doing. I just see a question from Jared asking, will the file name contain the architecture? So that's the part where it currently does in some cases and not in others. Like right now it does for the root disk, but doesn't for the other files. That's why I think we'll just create, instead of this being like a flat tree, we'll create a per architecture folder inside of that update, and then move the files in there to just avoid any kind of potential conflicts. And then the JSON would then in here show AMD64/IncusOS, ARM64/IncusOS, or more likely X86 because that's the name we like to use instead, slash the files. And we already have the architecture recorded in JSON for each of them. That also makes it a bit easier for anyone who wants to do partial mirroring, as we do in like Operation Center, where you will need to keep the update file as it is because it's signed, but you could just not include all the artifacts. So anyway, that's the plan there. I think I'll just do the folder structure because that's much easier, much less likely to cause us issues. So I'll try and implement that later today. You'll probably see some code being merged around that soon. And then we'll effectively have support for both architectures as far as our images. That again, ARM64 not super likely to be useful to most users since it does require the use of UEFI, Secure Boot, and a TPM, which is not something you'll find on your normal Raspberry Pi. if you have like Ampere or Ultra or equivalent servers at home or at work, those should be fine. But if you're trying to run on commodity ARM64, that will be more of an issue. So you can try it inside of Incus. Incus VMs do work now. We had a TPM issue last week. That bug has been fixed. So if you can run Incus VMs on ARM64, then you're able to run IncusOS in there for testing. Alrighty. That's gonna be it for this week. If you've got any questions around any of this stuff, feel free to leave them down below, or you can go on our community forum and chat. And just trying to remember the release cadence. Yeah, I think we still have 2 weeks before Incus release, so next week is going to be most likely another IncusOS live stream. And see you then. Have a good one. Bye.